2 decades before I returned to academia. I had earned my PhD, all the while working as a public historian. Started out in a master's program that included a certificate in public history, and knew from the get-go that what I really wanted to do was work in public history. There was no question in my mind. I got the PhD because I had things that I wanted to write about. I continued for years after I earned my PhD working in the public sphere. You know, it's interesting when Warren talks about the money that you can earn, as little as it is. One of the reasons, and for those of you who work in public history, this will resonate. One of the reasons, and by no means the most important reason, but one of the reasons that I was interested in returning to academia and in working at a university was because as a public historian, I spent a couple decades, well, earning a living sometimes, but more than that, having to raise my own salary and the salary of people who worked for me. It's exhausting. And these are some of the issues you have to think about when you're not working as a consultant, when you're not working in the field that allows you to write as a consultant for journals, magazines, and newspapers. If you're working from within an institution, a public history institution, fundraising is an enormous part of what you have to do, and that is exhausting. That's not the main reason that I returned to academia. I returned to the academy because I love being in the classroom. And I find that as a public historian, I bring something to the classroom that some of my colleagues don't do, in part because they're not interested in doing that. I was radicalized as a public historian as an undergraduate when I was doing some research at a local historical society, and found that I was really interested in the way, and I was a senior in college, and really interested in the way that this historical society was presenting its stories to the public, and decided that what I really wanted to do was cap my senior year in college with an internship at this local historical society. Pretty well-known, fairly major historical society, right down the street from my university, 2 blocks from my university. Went to the person in the department who would have been the best liaison, the best supporter of this sort of internship, and he said, "I'm afraid I can't sign off on this. Don't you think it's a little too practical?" I didn't, I was a fairly young woman at the time, and didn't know enough and didn't feel confident enough to challenge him. Went and found someone else outside the history department to sponsor the internship, and proceeded with a career that lasted a couple of decades. The tensions are still there, and I don't mean at all to belabor or bemoan the tensions between academia and public history. In fact, I think we have a tendency to exaggerate those. I mean, it's clear that the AHA and the OAH have devoted considerable time and resources to making sure that public historians or historians who work with feet in both camps, as I do, and as my fellow panelists do, have an opportunity to talk about what it is we do. I will say that in a session that I went to yesterday, one of the foremost scholars in the particular field of the session was making a clear distinction, with some disdain, between professional and non-professional history. And the non-professional histories were being written by people who don't work from within the confines of an academic institution. So it persists. As much as we are conscious of the need to acknowledge public history, those tensions still exist. I'll be honest and tell you that a couple years ago I was on a job interview for a public history position at a major R1 university that had a public history program, and was asked to talk about the intersections between public and academic history in my own work. And I did that. And felt very comfortable doing that, loved the topic. It's something that means a great deal to me. Thank you. And at the end of my talk, the first question was someone who, with great disdain, said, "Is there anything that you do where you don't think about the public?" This was for a public history position, and in fact I said, "Well, no." And then I backtracked because it was a job interview, and I went on for some time about my commitment to the discipline and my commitment to my field of scholarship, which is early American women's history. And I wasn't at all committed to the words that I was saying. My real answer to that is no.